Alrighty, problem 3B on our Unit 2 study guide. We are trying to find the zeros, wholes, and vertical asymptotes of rational functions. So if we're looking at number B, again, just like on part A of this problem, we are just trying to factor the numerator and factor the denominator, and then look for corresponding parts. So, to factor the numerator, as I keep saying, you always want to try and factor out the GCF if possible. So if we're looking at 6x cubed plus 12x squared, the GCF of that is going to be 6x squared. What are we left with? Well, what do you multiply 6x squared by to get 6x cubed? You multiply it by x. What do you multiply 6x squared by to get 12x squared? You multiply it by positive 2. Okay, that is as factored as it's going to get. So let's look at our denominator. Negative x squared plus x plus 6, x plus 1. Again, like I always say, I like to deal with quadratics that have leading coefficients of 1. So I'm going to factor that negative 1 out of there, and I'm left with x squared minus x minus 6. And I'll just go ahead and write that linear term down. Okay, let's factor that quadratic. That should be a piece of cake. So I'm going to move over here now, rewrite it, 6x squared, x plus 2, all over negative. We're going to factor this sucker. And we're going to get, of course, I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together to give me negative 6 and add together to give me negative 1. That's going to be negative 3. And positive 2. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. So I'm golden. That one was pretty straightforward to do. So let's go ahead and just interpret our results. So again, like I said, I always look for my wholes first. And if we look at this problem, we see we have x plus 2 in the numerator and in the denominator. So I'm going to have a whole at x equals negative 2. Next up, you can look for zeros or vertical asymptotes. Doesn't really make a difference. Let's go ahead and look for zeros next. So a rational function is 0 when the numerator is 0. So, well, the only term we have left is this 6x squared, and the only thing that's going to make that 0 is, well, you guessed it, 0. So we have a 0 at x equals 0. Hooray! Cool. Let's go to our last step for the problem. We want to find the vertical asymptotes. So to do that, all we got to look at is to see when our denominator is equal to 0. We got two linear factors that are going to make it equal to 0, which give us a vertical asymptote at x equals 3. Rewrite that x equals 3, and that's corresponding to that linear factor, of course, and at x equals negative 1. So I'm done. I got my whole, I got my 0, I got my vertical asymptote, and that sucker is factored.